Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. Here's a bit of story time. A few years ago, I was looking at buying myself a case for my daily driver PC, and that's the PC that I use not for editing, but just the regular things that I do day to day before I switch to my M1 Mac Mini. Well, now it's M2 Pro. Anyway, long story long, I settled on the Phanteks P300A because it did a few things I needed it to do. First of all, ATX motherboard. I actually did a video where I modded it to fit eATX. I'll put that in the description if you want to see that. And while the P300A is a good case, it does have a few limitations. And that's where the G300A comes in. It hopes to improve on some of the limitations at the P300A, but does it actually do it? Spoiler alert, yes and no. So let's find out what makes the G300A tick. However, in an unusual turn of events, we're not gonna do it the usual way. I'm going to show you what's changed rather than every detail about this case, because we've done the P300A and it is very similar. Let's take a look at the G300A. See guys, I wasn't kidding. I still have my P300A system. On the left is the P300A, on the right is the G300A. One of the things you're probably noticing straight off the bat, the P300A allowed for a single 120mm fan to be installed on the top of the case. Whereas with the G300A, what they've done is they've opened it up a little bit, and now you can do a 240mm liquid cooler on the top here, keeping in mind that you do have a RAM height limitation, which is pretty common with these type of cases, which is, I believe, around 42mm. On the P300A, you'll notice you can only install up to two 140mm fans up the front, and there's no scoop at the bottom if you wanted to get a bit of extra airflow, because that's just a limitation of the case. Whereas on the G300A, there's an intake scoop here, there's an additional cutout as well that allows for installation for up to a 360mm radiator up the front. You'll notice that on the P300A that we can only mount two fans up the front, and this is for a very interesting reason, because the front panel is flush and the fans mount to that flush front panel. On the G300A, it's a little bit different. They've pushed this panel out, which has allowed us to install three fans up the front. On the P300A, it used this standard Phanteks bracket, which you can pop the SSDs out of and lift them away from the case. But they've changed to this newer method where there's a removable bracket and you mount all of the drives to this single bracket, and then you put that bracket back in with all your drives on it, if that is what you wanted to do here. As you can see on my system, I've just used it for cable management to hold down the EPS power connector. Another thing that I noticed while looking at both of these is one of the bits of feedback that I had about the P300A was the fact that, yes, you can technically fit an eATX motherboard in this case, but I'll link to the video where I modified this case. You can see like my jankiness here, but I cut out a few of these support pieces here so I could push through that 24-pin power connector. Luckily, with the board that I used in the original build, it had a right-angled connector, so it was easy to plug in this way. And in fact, the X570 Extreme that I used almost has all of the ports along that edge like that, so I needed to make clearances for that. I think you'll probably run into trouble using some other eATX boards, but the trick would be putting in the power supply and all the cables first and then put the motherboard in if you wanted to do that. So I think it's odd that they didn't take my feedback for people who really wanted to push the limits of this case, but at the same time, I can't blame them because as it stands, this is a very, very small case. In a weird turn of events, I was just eyeballing these cutouts along here, and I'd noticed that it looked slightly different to what I cut away from the P300A when I was looking at the G300A. And it turns out that the biggest complaint I had with this support beam here was the fact that I couldn't plug in a 24-pin power connector with a right-angled connector because this was too far down. Seems like someone at Phanteks was listening, because they've made the gap from here to here only 45 millimeters, where on the original case, it was closer to 60. And I said something like, if this was just 1.5 centimeters higher, I could probably plug in a 24-pin power connector on a weird motherboard. Someone was listening because they did exactly that. Funnily enough, it doesn't stop there either. They've removed a bunch of supports down here as well. So for those right-angled USB 3.2 front panel headers and your SATA connectors for your drives, you now have access to them if you're using an eATX board. So again, this is a case that supports an eATX board that is not technically supporting eATX. Does that make sense? Does all of this mean that I need to transplant the hardware from this PC into the G300A? Claire reckons I should do it. I'm not sure. Let's see what happens. Let's keep going down this rabbit hole. All of that leads into GPU support. Now, just as a bit of a side story on my side quest to extract this GPU from the build that we did the other day with it, I just smashed the TG panel. But you know, that happens. Anywho, this 4090 Founders Edition will fit in the P300A. However, you'll have to remove the front fans, and you might not actually ever be able to put the front fans in there again, right? I mean, it can be tricky, and plus this has already got a system in it. However, what they've done with the G300A is they've notched out this section here to allow for bigger GPUs to be installed. You're gonna lose some compatibility with bigger GPUs if you install a front mounted radiator. The maximum GPU clearance for the G300A is 390 millimeters, and the 4090 Founders Edition fits in here perfectly. And I'm gonna say that even with a 360mm radiator, you'll probably be able to fit it with a bit of finagling and fendangling. That's most of the new stuff that you need to know about the G300A, but let's do our usual thing. Let's do a build in it, and let's test the thermals and do all that stuff. All right, let's take a look at the thermal performance. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thermals aren't too bad. One thing I will always recommend when building in a case like this, especially with that filter on the top of the case, is to remove it because it improves thermals quite a lot. And I think for such a small case and the components chosen for this build, yeah, the thermals aren't too bad at all. I don't have much more to add to that. And if you're interested in any of the hardware used in this build, I'll put a PC part picker list down below in the description. You can check that out as you like. And there's also little cards through those parts of the video so you can see all of the stuff that was used anyway. So that's why I don't really talk about that stuff anyway. But how do I feel about the Phanteks G300A? I feel like Phanteks listened to some of the feedback that a lot of people have had with the original P300A over the years, and they've just kind of refined their formula for their really small ATX case. I think they've done a pretty good job here. Now, this case is on the cheaper side of the Phanteks lineup of cases, so the materials used aren't as premium as other Phanteks cases. However, one thing you need to take into account is how much you're going to be paying for this case if you do decide to buy it. But I'll come back to that in a second. Because the G300A is so similar to the P300A, I don't have much more to say about the case because everything that I've needed to say about this case in the past, I've covered with the P300A. And as mentioned, there's links to our P300A content down below in the description. And I mean, you guys got a bit of a comparison between the two, considering it is a case that I am still using, and I'm considering switching that Linux PC of mine into this case because of those little nice to haves. If you're interested in getting your hands on the Phanteks G300A, they're starting at around $70 US for the version with a single fan, and for the version we've got here, around $80 US at the time of filming this video. And the case should be available at the time of this video going live, so if you're watching this in the future, this thing is well and truly out. I think this is a bit of a weird time for Phanteks to be releasing a new case, considering we're only a few weeks out from Computex 2023 in Taiwan, which is something we'll be going to. We'll be attending the Phanteks suite and taking a look at all of their new stuff that they've got on offer. So make sure you subscribe to see our Computex 2023 coverage coming live from Taipei in Taiwan in about 2 or 3 weeks time. Or if you're watching this in the future, YouTube's a bit of a time machine. You can watch that now, I suppose. Wow, how cool is that? Anyways, if you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. It's available by clicking that join button right down there, down below, and do the nice old thing and hit the like button, hit subscribe. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peek, we seek, and yeah, I think Phanteks has done a really nice job keeping the price down, considering you get 3 fans with this configuration here. Not only that, it's a decent case. I loved the P300A, and the G300A fixes a few things that were not necessarily wrong, but a few things that could have been improved. Thanks for watching. Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick, story time. A few years ago, what the hell does that mean? Just straight up, story time. What? Oh, it gets the blood pumping, mate. Yeah, mate.